So everyone in Toronto hates shoebox studio condos, or at least that's what I'm told in my YouTube comments and on Twitter all of the time. But the reality is buyers and renters vote with their wallets. And when you look at the premiums that studios get on both the resale market and the rental market, it becomes pretty clear that people in Toronto love studios. So hear me out here. I think studio condos honestly get a lot of undeserved hate. Yes, condos are the first rung on the property ladder, and studios are the first rung of that first rung. And so I think the hate on shoebox studios is actually just a vector for a hate on affordability. The reality is if these studios were $150K, I don't think people would be complaining all that much because somebody wants to live in a studio. So I wanted to show you this example. This just sold. It's a 264 square foot studio at 87 Peter. So right in King West. This unit is tiny, and I mean really tiny. 264 square is about as small as you can possibly build. Let's grab a photo where you can see the whole thing. There you go. Boom. That's it. That's the unit. That and a little bathroom right behind there. Now, some people in the comments will say this is inhumane. I don't think so. You've got AC, you have heat, you have electrical appliances. You can cook breakfast in bed. What really annoys people is that this is selling for $409,000. When you break that down on a per square foot basis, you are at $1,550 per square foot. And this is sort of my point is the premium that studios get. The data is pretty clear. These things are moving incredibly well. And everyone on Twitter is telling me, oh yeah, the studio apartment is dead. But the data shows the opposite. Now, when you look at 87 Peter as a whole and you look at the other units in this building, we'll just go to the average price per square foot. And you can see that the building this year is averaging about $1,200 a square foot. Back in the peak, it was $1,355. Today, it is $1,200 a square. Meanwhile, of course, this studio pulled $1,550 a foot. Yes, it's a penthouse unit, but what do you get for that? Really just 10-foot ceilings instead of 9-foot. So nothing. And if we look at rents in the building, you can see that you're at $2,000 a month. So this one that just leased, for example, $2,100 a month, 318 square feet, which puts the per square foot rental rate at $6.60. Again, if we look at the average per square foot rent rate across all bedroom types in this building at $477. So that's a massive premium on studio rentals. Now, like I said, studios are not by any means immune to the market. They just seem to be moving slightly better than other types of units. But I wanted to show you this recent example at 55 Mercer. So 55 Mercer is a recently completed building, and this unit just sold there. So it is a 370 square foot studio. It sold for $432,000, putting it at just shy of $1,200 a square foot. Now, this one was interesting to me because although I didn't sell this building at launch, I remembered the price list and I remembered what these units started at. So I wanted to show you the difference in the 2020 pre-construction price versus today's resale price to give you an idea of how underwater some people can be on pre-construction that is closing today. So here's the original price list. You can see that this particular unit, the 370 square foot studio, it started on the 10th floor and it started at $575,000. Their resale price was $432,000, which means on paper, you're looking at a loss of $143,000. But of course, real estate has a lot of fees and costs in getting in and getting out of it. And so that's not actually the loss. So I've taken some liberties and made some assumptions here, granted, but it probably looks something like this. So you have commission on the resale at 5%. So you're looking at $21,000 there. Floor premiums, right? Because they were on the 30th floor and this starting price is from the 10th floor. So I just assumed $1,000 a floor. Might be 500, might be 1,500. Who knows? I don't remember. I didn't sell the building. Land transfer tax, assuming double land transfer, probably not a first-time home buyer here, right? $15,900. And then development charges were pre-capped at $11,000. And again, because I didn't sell the building, I don't know what the parkland levies look like. I don't know if the caps were hard caps or soft caps. And so really, I don't want to make any more assumptions than that. But realistically, you're looking at a loss here of over $200,000 on this particular purchase that would have happened in 2020 and would have just resold now. Point I'm kind of making here is that Twitter keeps telling me studio condos are dead. Nobody wants studios. Everybody wants larger, more livable units. I'm sure everybody wants a larger, more livable unit. But the point that I'm making here is that the premium still exists, right? Like the studio resale premium over other condo type premium is still there. It's still about 10%. And the rental premium is even wider, right? So you can see the rental premium here is almost 20%. So per square foot per month, you're going to pay 20% more for a studio than any other type because there's just a lot of people who want to rent studios. Or probably more accurate, there's a lot of people who are forced to rent studios because that is what is affordable to them. Now that we're talking about rents, I wanted to show you this really interesting chart I got from my friend over at Stewart Real Estate. If you're a developer and you need consulting, go to the Stewarts. All right, guys like the Rain Man of charts. So all this chart is showing is the rental premium for the downtown core versus the suburbs in various cities. And you can see Toronto here, for example. We used to have a 36% rental premium for the downtown core. Today, it's only 16%. San Francisco, 35% down to 14% today. Chicago, 9% down to 1%. Orlando, 6% down to 3%. Some other cities, I would call them sort of like tier 1 cities, are holding up a little bit better. So for example, New York's rental premium, 31%. You see the COVID dip in premium when everyone fled the city, and then it rebounded. We didn't really get the same rebound in Toronto. We haven't seen much of it. Yeah, we're slightly better than we were at peak COVID, but not by much. And just to show you a real life example of that. So you remember that studios at 55 Mercer, studios at 87 Peter, right in King West, right in downtown Toronto are about $2,000, $2,100 a month, right? Well, this building is 10 years old and it's out in Scarborough. It's at Scarborough Town Center. And if we look at studio rentals there, you'll see they're the exact same, right? 2,100, 2,000, 2,150. And these don't have parking, right? So there's not a $150, $200 parking premium there. That's just what they're renting for. The floor is $2,000. And when you go to sold studios, you can see the same thing. You're right around that $400,000 range, right? Now you can see here the building is averaging $876 per square foot. And shout out Condos.ca for making all of this data so easily accessible. These guys saved me so much time. Now let's take a look at this recent sale. This studio that just sold for $380,000, 323 square feet. So you are at $1,176 a square all the way out in Scarborough. So we have two one and dones that just sold there. Here's one, 551, $822 a square foot. You have this one here, 550, $823 a square foot. Well over $1,100, almost $1,200 a square foot for a studio. As soon as you're at a one and done, right? As soon as you're at a one and done with parking, you're in the low $800 per square foot range. So people always say developers shouldn't be allowed to build studios. They should build large, livable family suites. But the truth is they do. So 10% of new launches in Toronto are required to be 3 bedrooms. And developers mark down those prices considerably, often losing money on the 3 bedrooms and making up for their profit margin on the smaller units that they can mark up a lot more and still sell. And even with that pricing strategy, 3 bedrooms are almost always still the last units to sell. They tend to linger all the way to completion when sometimes they get picked up by some end users. But the reality is those 3 bedrooms are really hard units to sell unless they're in like boutique luxury buildings that are in certain neighborhoods, like your downsize or special building. But yeah, people love to say like build more 3 beds, build more 2 and dens. Nobody buys them. So if we need them, you would think people would be buying them, but people clearly don't want them. And studios outperform to such a degree that a lot of the times I feel that the premium placed on them in pre-construction often actually isn't enough. And the other units should be marked down more with studios marked up more. You can look at Cliffside. It's in a different area of Scarborough, whatever, right? But anyways, Cliffside recently launched. They're in Scarborough. Look at the studios here. You're $1,200 a square, $1,200 a square. $1,200 a square. Well, we just saw a 10-year-old resale example in Scarborough selling for $1,200 a square foot. But then as soon as you get into the one and dens, you're still north of $1,000 a foot, but we know resales at $800. So all of a sudden the premium is so much higher. And this is the strange thing about Toronto, the GTA as a whole, is how far out you have to go to get any sort of rental discount. It's kind of insane. If you take this map that again I stole from the Stewarts, you take this map and you look at like New York, for example, and you look at the outskirts here, like this is just a map showing the GTA, and you look at the rent discounts you get for going this far out, the discounts are immense, right? They're like 30, 40%. Here in Toronto, you don't get a discount. Like we just looked at an example in Scarborough, but we can go further out if you want. So here's an example in Erin Mills, right? You go to price history, studio rent, $2,000 a month. We could go to M City in Square One. Studio, Jesus, $2,250, but that's with parking. $2,300 without parking. $2,100 without parking. $2,000 a month. We can go all the way out to Hamilton before we start to see some discounts. And even then, in Hamilton, studio, condo, $400,000. No parking, downtown Hamilton, $1,850 a month. So you're getting a whopping discount in downtown Hamilton for renting a studio of $150 a month. If you have to commute to Toronto, you're going to spend more than the $150 just on your commute, right? So you're not saving any money if you work downtown for 3 days a week or whatever. You're not saving any money by moving out to Hamilton. This didn't used to always be the case. And so I'm curious what people think causes this. I've got a couple of things, I think. I mean, number one is the green belt, right? There's only so much. You can't really build that far out. Another thing that causes it is, of course, international students just looking for any place to live, no matter how far from the school. They're just looking for a place to rent. You can see that when you list condos for rent in new buildings in Vaughan, for example. You get all of these applications for like a 1-bedroom and den where you'll have 4 people on the applicant list, right? And I think finally, one of the reasons this happens is there's just some sort of ceiling on rental affordability. There's only so much the average person can afford in rent that as they search further and further for a discount, it just brings up the rents in those surrounding areas. So anyways, I don't really know what the point of this video was. I just wanted to show you those 2 recent sales. And I worked narrative into it on the fly here. But to me, the hate against studios is unwarranted. I would absolutely live in one again. I had no problems living in it. Like, I had a great time. I don't know. I don't see what's inhumane about it. Like, there are genuinely inhumane ways to live. Living in a 350 square foot studio in a walkable neighborhood with appliances and air conditioning is not the definition of inhumane. I think the problem, and the problem we all agree exists, is just affordability in general.